Hello and welcome to Spheniscidae, the flightless bird on the edge. Try say that before your morning coffee. Right, so what we have here is the QSP penguin. So what was that Spheniscidae nonsense all about? Well, Spheniscidae is the scientific name, whether you want to say it's Spheniscidae or Sphenicidae or whatever, but it is the scientific name for a penguin. And of course, the penguin is a flightless bird. Right. So, with that out of the way, I am going to be doing the usual materials, dimensions, and weight, and then dive into design and attributes of this knife. Let's get cracking. Right, so we've got not atypical of QSP knives. We've got a D2 blade on this. We've got handles of brass, and that's not just a brass color. That is two solid slabs of brass on either side of that handle. Liner, we've got stainless steel, and in fact all the other hardware, the clip, the screws, that is all stainless steel. And then the blade, the pivot assembly makes use of what they describe as copper washers. Naturally one would think phosphor bronze, but it does say on their website that those are copper washers, so we will go with that. Right, dimensions and weight. So blade length we've got is 78 millimeters, and that's 3.07 inches. Blade thickness is 3 millimeters, and that's 0.12 inches. Handle thickness is 11.3 millimeters, and that is 0.44 inches. Close length of the knife is 102 millimeters, that's 4 inches. Overall length of the knife is 180 millimeters, and that's 7.06 inches. And then weight of the knife. And once again, as I always do, I have got stated weights, but I will check that on my scale. Let's get that centered up and lined up and hopefully cranked up as well. What are we on? We're on ounces. So let's see how that stacks up. 4.9 ounces. Wow. Quite a bit lighter than what they say. So QSP state that this is 5.05 ounces. Interesting. And that is milliliters. As I've said before, that's going to be the same as grams. 139 grams, and they say 143 grams, so that's quite a bit off. Now, there are a number of variations on this knife, so it is potentially, they quote the weight of one of the other options, one of the other versions of the knife, but I'll speak about those other versions a little bit later. But I would have thought that the brass one would have been one of the heaviest, but maybe the copper version, anyway, I'll speak about the options a little bit later. Right, let's get this open and start looking at the shape, design, and attributes of the knife. So a very clean, sort of simple overall design and shape to the knife. We've got I've mentioned already, a D2 blade steel that I've seen most people describe as sheep's foot, and always I debate this with myself, whether a blade is a sheep's foot blade or a Warncliffe blade, and I suppose one can argue either. And I brought a couple of other knives out here that I suppose I could have brought out when I was doing size comparisons. Have I brought them out? Yes. So here's the one, and this is a Benchmade. This is the Benchmade bone collector, the smaller bone collector. Now, that is, to me, a typical sheep's foot. You've got a little bit of a belly to the blade and a little bit of a rounder shape to the back there. So I would have thought that that's more a sheep's foot, and this may be more Warncliffe. But then one pulls in, right on the other side there, we pull in a knife like this, and this is the Kaiser sheep dog, and that they describe as a sheep's foot blade. And well, maybe that's a little bit closer to this blade, but even there you get a little bit of a curve on the edge. So there's that. That could be sheep's foot or Warncliffe. And then there's another knife I brought out here, and have I brought it out here? Let's just scan. Right, here it is. And this is also a Kaiser knife. And this is the Kaiser Rogue, and that to me is, definitely a Warncliffe blade. And I think this one may be a little closer to this. But anyway, there you go. I just wanted to show you the debate that goes on in my mind sometimes, and I think on some other people's minds as well. Is it a Warncliffe or is it a a sheep's foot design. And again, this is one of the knife I've seen most people call this a sheep's foot, but I've seen it described as a Warncliffe as well. All right, enough about the blade shape. Let's keep going. So the finish to that blade is a satin finish, and a very, very beautifully done satin finish. So you can kind of see the grind lines on that flat grind, by the way, the primary grind on that blade, and they sort of angled slightly back, but that very, very tidily done. There we go. There's a nice angle where you can catch that nicely. And then the grind lines, that satin grind line on the ricasso and flat of the blade, that runs longitudinally. But that, the way the light plays and catches that, really does look very, very good. The edge on this knife, again, as per the other QSPs that I've had in my hands, very neatly done and exceptionally sharp out of the box. And then we've got a decent size sharpening tool behind that edge, so easy enough to keep that blade, that edge nice and tidy as well. Spine of the blade also very neatly done. We've got a bit of a very narrow, thin little beveled edge running along the spine, and then you can see the jumping towards the back of the blade towards the handle. And at the same time, you can see the thumb studs, big thumb studs on that, but those also nicely shaped. You can see the little bit of machining on that as they taper off towards the tip of those thumb studs. So that also very, very neatly done. Markings on the blade. D2, the blade steel on that side, on the flat of the blade there, and on the other side, the QSP logo, that little logo with the flames coming off it. And I've mentioned the QSP in other reviews. That is quality, service, and price. That's what that stands for. Right. Rest of the shape of the blade of the knife, very, very squared off. And I mentioned the fact that it is a very sort of clean and simple design. You can see very sort of clean, pure, I suppose you could say, lines around that, nothing ornate, nothing complicated, and quite slab-sided to those scales, those brass scales as well. So along the edge, a little bit of rounding all the way around the edge of that handle. So the ergos in general on this knife are really good. So that's what it looks like in my medium-sized hands, and I wear a large glove. You can see I comfortably fit into that general shape of the handle there. I fit comfortably in there, and bigger hands, once again, I suppose you're going to sort of stray towards the back of that handle. No front finger choil, no finger choil on that blade. You can kind of choke up by getting your finger onto that flat portion of the hand guard on the handle. If you get your finger on there, you can relatively comfortably choke up on the blade in that way. And either way that you hold the knife, your thumb very naturally falls onto that bit of jimping on the spine of the blade, whether you're holding it like that or choking up. So no hot spots, all good there. The knife does feel very, very good in hand. The hardware in this particular instance, in this brass version of the knife, all blacked out, as you can see. So we've got a blacked out pocket clip that is tip up and reversible. Quite an interesting way that this attaches to the handle. So it isn't countersunk. You can see that's where the handle would sit if you flipped it around. So easier to show it where the clip isn't at the moment. But the clip isn't countersunk onto the surface of the handle. It actually slides inside. You can see that little gap that's been created. So if you move the clip off the right hand tip up onto the left hand tip up, that clip slides into that little slot that's been created. So that's how it's been countersunk in inverted commas. And then you've got the little screws to keep that in place. And you've got the extra screws already there, so you don't have the little holes left open when you move the clip. So very deep carry, because it is mounted the way that it is, and because it is one of those wraparound pocket clips, you can see that is exceptionally deep carry. So that in your pocket, all you're going to see is the clip. You're not going to see the knife at all. And I suppose that and the general size of the knife sort of firmly puts it into that sort of gentleman folder category of knife. Just going back to that clip, then you can see the space in the back there, pretty decent. Those screws, however, have not been countersunk, so a lot of effort to get the clip out of the way, but then they didn't countersink the screws. But anyway, I still think relatively decent space behind that clip. And then the round holes drilled into that clip so that you can get to those screws to move that clip to the other side. Nice little lanyard hole, so one of those sort of capsule or pull-shaped lanyard holes towards the back of the handle and towards the spine. That also incredibly neatly done. Excuse me. I'll try and survive till the end of this review, if one can call it that. Right, what else do I need to speak about? The liner, so standard liner lock, nothing out of the ordinary there, but again, that also blacked out, and that does look good, the contrast of the black hardware against the brass of the scales. That really does look very, very good. Standoffs, we've got the two standoffs on the back, so open back design to the knife, but it is a very, very sturdy construction, so absolutely no flex to that handle at all. You can see the handle, how that's been shaped a little bit further back on the show side, and that's just to make it easier to get to that lock to unlock the blade. The finish to that, boy. And, you know, I've actually shown this knife in another review. I just pulled it in. In fact, it was the first QSP review that I'd done. I just pulled this in to show you that I have put my money where my mouth is. I was speaking about how impressed I was with the QSP knives that I'd seen up to that point. And I added this to my collection, and I simply couldn't resist it. If you've seen any of my other reviews, you know, I do like that sort of copper tone or brass tone to a knife. And in this particular case, it is actually brass, and it's got a beautiful stonewash finish to that brass as well, and that adds a little bit of heft to this knife as well. And that's also, I mentioned before, something I really do like in a knife. I like it when a knife has a little bit of heft to it and it feels solid in your hand. I do like that. So when I saw this knife and I got it in my hand, I couldn't resist it. So this has been added to the collection. A little bit of a scuff mark, but that's from me carrying, EDCing this knife quite a bit. Right, I think I've covered off everything in terms of design and shape of the knife. So let's speak a little bit about action. And the action on this knife is absolutely beautiful. It is brilliant. So the knife flies out when you get hold of those flipper tabs, not flipper tabs, thumb tabs. The knife does flick out beautifully, and then you can get your finger in the back there and kind of do the middle finger flick beautifully on the knife as well. And it is one of those that is really very, very smooth. So surprisingly smooth on what did they call it? The copper washes. Well, I shouldn't say surprisingly. Typically, phosphor bronze and copper, I suppose, would be the same. It's one of those things that when you're making use of washes that are, again, they say copper or phosphor bronze, they tend to become smoother and smoother with time. But this one was actually smooth right out of the box. So all good there. And then, of course, you can just roll the blade out in gentlemanly fashion as well. So really an excellent knife, a knife I really do like. Beautifully made again. The blade centering on this one, I think, might be a smidgen, if I hold it like that, smidgen to the right, if you can see past all the pocket dust and fluff on the knife. I did mention I've been carrying this quite a lot, but the quality of fit and finish once again on a QSP knife has really impressed me, especially when you consider the price point of these QSP knives. They really are hitting the ball out of the park. It is, you look at the price that you're paying and you get the knife in your hand. It is quite hard to believe when you compare it to other knives that this is at the price point that it is. So let me just lay this down there. So even though I did buy the knife, it is a knife that does come from Blades and Triggers, and I really do appreciate their ongoing support of the channel. So check this and other QSP knives and other brands of knives and other tactical goodies out at Blades and Triggers, and their website is BNT Online. Right, so now size comparisons and then a summary of my thoughts on the knife. And I suppose I've given that away clearly already. Right, so the first one I'll pull on is this, and this is the Spyderco PM3, the smaller version. Give you a bit of scale on that. Right, so there that is. And then this knife that's still on my desk, so I may as well use this, and this is the Medford Knife and Tool Slim Midi. A little bit longer and generally bigger, I suppose, in all dimensions. The Medford Slim Midi. And the Spyderco Manix 2, be some scale on that as well. Right. And what else? Where's the other knife that I normally do use? And there it is. And this knife, because it has been out for so long, and if you like knives, you should know that, as I always do say. That is the Benchmade Mini Barrage. Right. And I think that's it for size comparisons. In fact, I've got this once again lingering around on my desk, so I may as well show this. So this is the what is this? This is the Kaiser Apis, which I always speak about being a really nice gentleman folder. I really do like. And this one in the copper, this has got a copper overlay on the handle. I suppose those two look pretty good next to each other. How should I put those? Try to get the color a little bit with all my reflections. There we go. Those two look quite good together, and it also gives you a little bit of size perspective. So I do think that you can categorize the QSP Penguin as a gentleman folder. So now, summary of my thoughts. Another QSP knife that I'm really impressed with. It is beautifully finished off. The construction is great. I do like the simple design on this knife. I love the fact that it's got the brass on it. Great ergos. The finish on that blade is brilliant. And even more so, again, I'm going to say it, when you consider the price of this knife, the price of QSP knives versus the quality that you are getting is just exceptional. Now, what I didn't speak about, and I promised I would earlier on, was to speak about the other versions of the knife. Now, there's a whole plethora of options on this knife, or versions of this knife. So you've got micarta handles with the D2 blade steel. You've got micarta, but in a whole host of finishes and colors and textures of micarta. Then you get one that has a carbon fiber overlay, also with the D2 blade steel. Then you get, so this is the brass, you get one in a copper handle. That would also really appeal to me. So a copper handled version, once again with the D2 steel. And then you get a titanium frame lock version of this knife. And that has a 154 cm blade steel. So a little bit of a step up in terms of your blade steel, and a little bit of a step up in terms of cost as well, because well, in terms of general materials, the titanium and the 154 cm blade steel. And I spoke about the weight of the knife. So my weight, that I weigh a little bit lighter than they stated. The only one that could potentially be heavier, I would imagine, is maybe the copper version of the knife. But anyway, so there that is. Guys, and I think that is it. It's pretty much all I wanted to say about this knife that I've fallen through and have carried a lot now. But another QSP knife that I would recommend you to go and check out. Get one of these in your hand. I think they really would impress you, especially when you see the price of them. Guys, and I think now that is just about it. All that's really left for me to do is, once again, thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it when you do, and would equally appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can be notified every time I release a new video, because I really would love you to join me more often. And once again, if you did like the video, please do give it a like. It does help with the algorithms. And other than that, you go well, and God bless.